The human in the royal court, the grand hall of the Velthera royal palace sparkled with gold light. Tall alien nobles stood in silence. Their heads were high, their robes shining with power. In the center, on a crystal throne, sat King Zareth, ruler of the planet. But all eyes turned to the large silver door, because someone unexpected was about to enter, a human. The doors opened, a tall but simple-looking man walked in. No royal clothes, no glowing armor, just a black jacket, some old boots, and a polite smile. His name was Darren Holt. He was not a prince, not a soldier, not even rich. He was a diplomat from Earth, and this was his first time stepping inside a royal alien court. The room fell silent. Then came the laughter. It started soft, from the corner where the king's 3 daughters stood. Princess Vera, the eldest, smirked. Is that really him? Princess Zira, the middle one, laughed louder. He looks like a traitor who got lost. Princess Luneth, the youngest, whispered shyly. He's so plain. The court joined in. Even some guards chuckled, but Darren didn't react. He simply walked forward, calm and steady, and stopped 10 steps from the throne. He bowed low. Your Majesty, I bring peaceful greetings from Earth. The king said nothing. Darren waited patiently. The room watched him closely, waiting for him to panic or run or show anger. He did none of those things. Instead, he looked around the room and said softly, You have a beautiful world. I'm honored to see it. That made a few nobles blink. In surprise, he was polite, confident, and not bothered by their mocking. King Zareth finally stood. He was tall, with skin like blue stone, and glowing eyes that saw through lies. He spoke with a deep voice. Human, Earth has never sent one like you before. Why now? Darren nodded. Because we are ready to learn, and ready to share. I believe we can build something good together. The king stared at him for a long time. Then, slowly, he smiled. Brave words. But here on Velthara, words are tested. The crowd murmured. The king raised a hand toward his daughters. My daughters know our traditions well. Let them show you. Vara raised an eyebrow. You want us to entertain him? The king's voice was firm. I want you to teach him what it means to walk among royals. That night, Darren was given a guest room, not a grand suite, but still clean and quiet. As he looked out the tall window, he saw the 3 sisters in the courtyard, laughing together. He knew they didn't respect him, but he didn't come here to impress. He came to understand. The next morning, the real challenge began. Princess Vera invited him to a royal gathering, one meant for warriors and nobles only. He entered the hall, again underdressed, again mocked. One noble whispered, Earth must be desperate. Another said, maybe he cleans their ships. Darren sat calmly. Vera smiled sweetly but with sharp eyes. Human, she said. On our world, every noble earns their place. Tell me, what have you earned? Darren replied gently. Respect, trust, and the right to speak, if others are willing to listen. That answer made Luneth look up from her seat. Shira narrowed her eyes. She didn't like that the human had spoken with courage. Later that day, Darren walked in the gardens, alone. The air was warm. Flowers glowed softly under the twin suns. Suddenly he heard a voice, still pretending to be noble. It was Zira. Darren turned. I'm not pretending anything. I'm just being myself. She scoffed. That won't work here. He smiled. Maybe it should. Zira didn't know what to say to that. From a window above, King Zareth watched the human carefully. He saw something in Darren that the others didn't. He saw patience, kindness, and strength without pride. The king began to think, and his thoughts would soon change the future of his kingdom and the lives of his 3 daughters forever. The sisters. Cruel test. The next morning the royal garden was full of whispers. Servants talked quietly, guards exchanged curious glances, and the princesses were planning something. Princess Vara, the oldest and proudest, stood in front of her sisters with a sharp smile. He survived our jokes. Let's see if he survives our games. Princess Zira laughed. He wants to be noble? Let's treat him like one. Princess Lunith hesitated. What if he fails? Then he learns his place, Vara replied coldly. That afternoon, Darren received a message. You are invited to join a royal tradition, the trial of suitors. He read the words twice. No human had ever taken such a test, but Darren simply nodded and said, I accept. The next day, the court gathered in the outer arena. The stone walls echoed with laughter and excitement. Everyone had come to watch the strange earthman make a fool of himself. The king sat on his throne silently. His daughters stood at the center, dressed in ceremonial robes. Darren entered with quiet steps, dressed in simple training clothes. The crowd chuckled. He looks like a farmer, someone said. He won't last one round, said another. Princess Vara stepped forward. Today you will face 3 trials, one for each of us. Darren bowed politely. Understood. Vara smirked. The first is mine. Strength. Push the beast. A gate opened. A 4-legged creature, twice Darren's size, stepped into the arena. Its shoulders were wide, its eyes were red. It growled low. Darren blinked. You want me to push that? Vara smiled. Just move it 1 step, that's all. The crowd laughed again, but Darren didn't run. He didn't panic. He walked calmly toward the beast. He stopped in front of it and sat down. The crowd gasped. What is he doing? Darren reached into his bag and pulled out dried food. He placed it gently in front of the creature and waited. The beast sniffed, growled, then slowly walked forward to eat. 1 step. The crowd fell silent. Vara's smile faded. Trial 1. Complete, the announcer said. Shira stepped forward, annoyed. My trial, she said, is endurance. Stand inside the fire ring. A circle of blue flames lit up. They won't burn you, she said, unless you move. The fire was heat sensitive. 1 step meant real pain. Darren looked at the flames, then stepped inside. The crowd held its breath. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then 20. Sweat rolled down Darren's face, but he didn't move. He simply closed his eyes and stood still like a statue. The wind blew harder. The fire danced close to his skin. But still, he did not move. When 30 minutes passed, Zira raised her hand. That's enough. The flames vanished. Darren stepped out quietly. 2 trials done. The nobles were no longer laughing. Only 1 trial remained. Lunith walked forward, nervously. Her voice was soft. My trial is wisdom. Solve the puzzle. A floating cube hovered in the air. Each face had a different symbol. The cube twisted and turned, clicking softly. You must align all 6 sides, she said. Darren approached, watching it move. Everyone expected him to twist it wildly, to guess and fail. But instead, he sat cross-legged and simply watched. Minutes passed. The cube twisted itself. Darren studied the pattern, not rushing. Then he moved his hands slowly. Click, click, turn, pause. The cube stopped. 6 sides, aligned, trial complete. The crowd was silent. For the first time in Velthera history, a human had passed the royal trials, not with strength, not with power, but with calm, with kindness, with patience. Princess Vara stepped forward, her voice tight. You think this makes you one of us? Darren looked at her. No, I never wanted to be one of you. I just wanted to show that I respect your ways. She didn't answer. But Lunith smiled. That evening the king sat alone in his private chamber, deep in thought. The human had passed the trials. The court had watched, and now it was time to act. He summoned his daughters, and his voice echoed across the stone walls. You mocked him. Now you will marry him. The king's unexpected command. The royal chamber doors slammed shut behind them. Princess Vara, Zira, and Luneth stood in silence before their father's throne. King Zareth did not speak right away. He simply stared at his daughters with cold, glowing eyes. The silence was heavy. Then his deep voice broke it. You laughed at a guest. You mocked a man of honor. And now, you will fix it. Vara stepped forward, arms crossed. Father, it was just fun. He's only human. The king stood slowly. He faced the beast. He stood in fire. He solved Luneth's puzzle. You expected him to fail, Zira muttered. And yet he didn't. Luneth stayed quiet. Her fingers curled nervously in her robe. King Zareth raised his staff. The law of our ancestors is clear. A suitor who passes the trials may bond with royalty. Vara's eyes widened. You can't be serious. I am, he said. He has earned what none dared try. The sisters all spoke at once. Vara shouted, He is beneath us. Zira hissed. What will the nobles say? Luneth whispered. But he didn't even ask for marriage. The king silenced them with one word. Enough. He stepped down from the throne, his tall figure casting a long shadow across the floor. You judged him by his species. I judged him by his actions. He turned to Luneth. You smiled at him. I respect him, she said softly. He turned to Zira. You nearly burned him alive. Zira looked away. And Vara, he said, you were the first to mock him. Vara stood her ground. I will not marry a human. It is not tradition. The king's voice dropped to a cold whisper. Then you may step down from your title. The room froze. Even the guards looked up in shock. Vara's mouth opened, but no words came out. The king continued. All three of you will bond with him, not out of love, not out of duty, but to humble your pride. That evening, Darren sat quietly in his guest room, writing notes in a small earth notebook. He didn't hear the knock until it came a second time. He opened the door. Princess Luneth stood there alone. Her eyes were unsure but kind. The king has spoken, she said. Darren blinked. About what? You passed the trials. According to our law, you are now royal. I didn't do it to become royalty, Darren replied, surprised. I know, she said. That's why it matters. Later that night, all three sisters sat in their private chamber. No one spoke, until Vara finally broke the silence. This is madness, Zira replied. You saw the king. He won't change his mind. Luneth looked at her sisters. What if? It's not so bad. Vara stood. You want to be bonded to a human? He's weak. No, Luneth said. He's different. And maybe that's what we need. The next morning, the bonding ceremony was announced to the court. Whispers filled every hall. A human will marry the royal daughters? Impossible. Unheard of. But no one dared challenge the king. Darren stood at the edge of the royal garden, facing the three princesses. He looked calm, but inside, he felt the storm. Vara refused to meet his eyes. Shira stood stiffly, arms crossed. Luneth gave a small smile, hopeful but nervous. Darren bowed. I didn't ask for this. I never wanted to force anyone. Vara replied coldly. Then walk away. Darren looked at the sky, then at them. I will, if that's what you truly want. He turned to go. But Luneth's voice stopped him. Wait. She stepped forward. I don't hate you, she said. And I don't want you to leave. Darren paused. Shira let out a breath. If we must bond, then let it be on our own terms. Vara sighed. Fine. But don't expect me to smile. As the royal bond light circled above their heads, something strange happened. 3 glowing symbols appeared, one over each sister's heart, and a fourth, shining on Darren's chest. The court gasped. The ancient bond had accepted him fully. Not by force, by choice, and deep inside the temple walls, old stones trembled slightly, because something forgotten, had just returned. The forced bonding begins. The bond mark burned quietly on Vera's wrist. She stared at it like it was a curse. No one spoke as the bonding light faded from the sky. The royal crowd had already left the garden, whispering behind fans and robes. But Darren still stood in silence, looking at the three princesses. He had said nothing. He had done nothing, and that was what confused them most. That night, in the royal quarters, Vera ripped off her golden gloves and threw them against the wall. "This is humiliating." Zira sat with arms folded. "It's not his fault. The king forced it." Luneth sat near the window, touching her own glowing mark. "Then why doesn't he act like we belong to him?" Vera scowled. "Because he's pretending." "No," Luneth said quietly, "because he's not like us." Meanwhile, Darren stood alone in his private chamber, now part of the royal wing. The room was grand, filled with soft lights and velvet curtains. But Darren didn't sit on the soft couch or eat the fancy food. He stared out the window. His fingers gently traced the new symbol on his chest. "I didn't want this," he whispered. But he didn't hate them, not even the one who insulted him. Most, he just wanted to understand. The next day, Darren stepped into the palace garden again. He saw Zira training with an energy whip slicing through the air. Her moves were fast, sharp, deadly. He walked closer. "You move like a storm," he said calmly. Shira stopped mid-swing, turning to face him. Her voice was sharp. "Trying to flatter me now?" "No," he replied. "Just admiring something powerful." She narrowed her eyes but said nothing as he walked away. Later, in the dining hall, Vera sat alone with her food untouched. Darren approached slowly and stopped at a respectful distance. "Do you hate me?" he asked. She looked up, eyes cold. "I hate being told what to do." "That makes two of us." She blinked. He nodded politely and turned to leave. "But before he walked away, he added softly, "I'm not your enemy, Vera. I never was." And then he left her alone with her thoughts. That evening, Luneth found Darren by the royal library. He was sitting on the steps, reading an old book in broken translation. She sat beside him without a word. He looked at her and smiled. "Found me again. You're always alone," she said softly. "Not by choice, just habit." She hesitated, then quietly said, "You don't talk like other men." "Is that good or bad?" She smiled for the first time. "Different. That's better." Word spread through the palace like wind through trees. The human didn't try to rule. He didn't touch the princesses. He didn't brag about passing the trials. He simply existed, calm, gentle, and steady. And that started to do something no one expected. It changed the sisters. One morning, Zira caught Darren helping a young kitchen boy fix a broken delivery cart. "You're royal now," she said. "You don't have to do servant work." "Helping is never below anyone," he replied. "Where I come from, rank means little. Character means everything." She didn't answer, but later that night she left her combat training early and thought about what he said. Vera began watching Darren from a distance. He laughed easily. With servants, never raised his voice, and even offered his jacket to a trembling guard during a cold patrol. "He has no power," she said to herself. But somehow, people listened to him. 1 week after the bonding, the sisters were called. To the king, he asked only one question. "Has your opinion changed?" Vara didn't speak. Shira looked away. Luneth stepped forward. "Yes," she said. "He's not weak." The king nodded. "Then watch carefully. His greatest test hasn't come yet." And far beyond the palace walls, in the shadows of the northern mountains, something was stirring. An old rival house had learned of the humans' rise, and they were not pleased. Hearts start to shift. The mornings felt different now, not because the sky had changed, but because they had. The three royal sisters no longer avoided the human. They watched him. They followed him. And silently, They wondered about him. Princess. Vara stood on a balcony, arms crossed, watching Darren walk through the gardens below. He stopped to help an old gardener carry a water tank. He bowed politely to two guards passing by. He picked up a flower that had fallen and placed it gently back into the soil. He's still pretending, she whispered to herself. But her heart didn't agree. Shira watched him during combat drills. He wasn't strong, not like the warriors she trained with, but he was clever, fast, focused. And when she tripped and fell while flipping through the air, he rushed forward, not to laugh, but to help. She looked into his eyes. He didn't see her as weak. That unsettled her. Lunith met him often in the library. Sometimes they didn't speak. They just sat beside each other, reading quietly, under the golden glow of the skylight. One evening she asked him, "Don't you miss your world?" He looked at her gently. "Sometimes. But maybe I was meant to be here." Her hands gripped the book tighter. She didn't want him to leave anymore. One afternoon, a sudden cry broke the peace. A young alien child had wandered too close to the wild barrier wall where jungle beasts roamed. The child screamed as a snake creature wrapped around her leg. No guards reacted in time, but Darren did. He ran across the courtyard, jumped over the wall, and slid down the muddy slope without hesitation. The beast hissed. He grabbed a broken spear and drove it into the ground between the creature's eyes, not to kill, but to distract. Then, with bare hands, he tore the snake's coils free and pulled the crying child into his arms. The guards finally reached him and helped lift the girl. Darren's hand was bleeding, but he smiled through the pain. "She's safe. That's what matters." The palace went silent that evening. Servants whispered in awe. The sisters said nothing aloud, but each one of them felt the same truth blooming inside their chest. This man is not weak. This man is not beneath us. This man is something else. Vara stood outside his door that night, hand raised to knock, but she didn't. Instead, she walked away, confused and angry at herself. Shira, unable to sleep, went to the training ground. She found Darren already there, swinging a wooden staff, slow and focused. "You train?" she asked. He turned, smiling. "Not to win, just to grow." She stepped beside him. "Teach me something human," she said. He handed her the staff, and they trained, in silence. Lunith placed a small flower near his food tray the next morning. She didn't say it was her, but Darren smiled when he saw it, and she smiled too, far from where he could see. The king watched all of this from above. He said nothing, but he knew. The bond was no longer forced. It was becoming real, but not everyone celebrated. In the outer districts, the House of Drax, the king's old enemy, learned of the humans' rising favor. "He bonds with all three daughters?" growled Lord Malrek. His advisors nodded. "He is more than a guest now. He may become heir." Malrek's eyes turned dark. "Then we must strike before that happens." Inside the palace walls, the sisters sat together for the first time in weeks. No arguing, no pride. "He saved a child," Lunith whispered. Shira nodded. "He trained beside me without mocking my mistakes." Vara looked at her hand. "I think we were wrong." They didn't say it aloud, but all three now wondered the same thing. What if we want him, not by order, but by choice? And in the calm before the storm, Darren stood alone on the palace balcony, looking up at the stars. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone. The attack on the palace, the sky cracked like glass, not from thunder, but from explosions. A loud siren wailed through the palace walls. Red lights blinked across every tower. The ground shook beneath the royal city of Velthara. They were under attack. Darren was the first to run toward the sound. He didn't stop to ask questions. He didn't wait for orders. He just moved. In the great hall, guards scrambled into formation. High-ranking nobles screamed. Servants fled through secret doors. The three sisters, Vera, Zira, and Luneth, stood together staring at the sky as enemy ships pierced the clouds. Darren reached them just as the main shield was hit. Boom! The glass dome over the throne room cracked and rained shards. "Get to safety!" a guard shouted. But Darren pointed. "Where's the king?" "He's still in the high chamber," Luneth said. Without a word, Darren ran toward the smoke. Outside the palace gates, the House of Drax had arrived in full force. Black ships, red flags, soldiers in bone armor. Lord Malrek stood at the front, smiling coldly. Time to remind the king what real blood looks like. Inside, Darren found the king pinned under part of a fallen beam. The old man was breathing, but trapped. Darren didn't wait. He braced himself and pushed with all his strength. His muscles burned, the beam shifted. The king groaned, then opened his eyes. "Human?" "Don't talk," Darren grunted. "Just breathe." With one final shove, he freed the king and pulled him to safety. Back in the royal courtyard, the sisters had picked up weapons. Vara led with a plasma blade. Shira fought with twin whips. Luneth shielded the wounded with energy fields. They didn't wait for others to protect them. They fought, but they were outnumbered, and the enemy was closing in. Darren burst out of the hall with the king leaning on his shoulder. Vera spotted them. "He got the king!" Zira shouted. "They're coming!" Darren handed the king to two guards. "Get him to the vault." Then he grabbed a fallen spear and turned to face the oncoming wave. Vera shouted, "You don't even know how to fight." Darren looked at her, eyes steady. "Then stay close and teach me fast." The first wave hit. Darren moved with instinct, dodging a strike and tripping his attacker with the spear shaft. Shira lashed her whips, covering his flank. Luneth protected his back with a barrier. Vera fought beside him, and for the first time, she trusted him. Blood and smoke filled the air. Alien screams. Explosions. The smell of fire. Darren's arms ached. His shirt was torn. His shoulder bled. But he didn't stop. Not once. Hours later, when the dust began to settle, the enemies were pushed back. The House of Drax had failed. Lord Malrek escaped with only a few soldiers. But Velthara still stood, because one human stood with it. Darren sat on the palace steps, breathing hard. His hands shook. His clothes were stained, but when he looked up, he saw them, all three sisters, walking toward him, not as royals, but as women who had seen him fight for their home. Vera knelt first. She took his wounded hand. "You didn't have to stay." "I know," he said. "But you did," she whispered. Shira sat beside him. "You're not just brave. You're ours now." Luneth gently rested her head on his shoulder. "Don't leave." Darren closed his eyes. "I wasn't planning to." From the throne tower, King Zareth looked down. He saw his daughters no longer proud and spoiled, but strong and changed. He saw the human, broken, tired, and covered in dirt, being held like a treasure, and he smiled. The bond was complete, not by law, not by pressure, but by choice. 3 hearts, 1 choice. The palace was quiet again. The battle was over. Smoke still rose in the distance, but peace had returned to Velthara. Yet inside Darren's heart, a new storm had begun. Because now, he had to choose. A week passed. He was healing, slowly. His shoulder was bandaged. His ribs ached. But what hurt most was uncertainty. Each of the 3 sisters had changed. Each had stood by him, and each had silently given him a piece of her heart. One morning, the king called Darren to the garden pavilion. It was quiet, peaceful. Birds sang soft, notes in the trees above. The king looked into his eyes. "You know why I summoned you?" Darren nodded slowly. "To make a choice." "You have the right," the king said. "Choose one daughter, and the bond becomes law." Darren looked. Down at his hands, he had fought monsters, survived the trials, earned their trust, but this was harder than all of it, because he respected all 3. That night, Darren stood in the starlit courtyard. He had sent word to each of the sisters, and now they waited. Vera, proud, brave, and now soft in ways she had never shown before. Shira, fierce, loyal, and secretly gentle when no one was looking. Lunith, quiet, kind, and the first to truly listen. Darren stepped forward. "I didn't come here for power," he said. "I didn't expect love, and I didn't want to be royal." The sisters watched him in silence. He continued. "You each taught me something." He looked at Vara. "You taught me courage." He looked at Zira. "You taught me balance." He looked at Lunith. "You taught me peace." He took a deep breath. "And I've learned I can't choose just one, because my heart is with all three." There was silence. Then Vera stepped forward, lips trembling. "You don't have to choose," she said. "Not anymore. We've already chosen you." Zira followed. "We were proud, blind, foolish." Lunith smiled. "But now, we see clearly." They stood together, three sisters once divided, now united. Darren's hands shook slightly as he reached out. Together, they placed their hands over his, and the royal bond symbols glowed, brighter than ever before. The sky above the palace shimmered. Golden light shot into the stars, and somewhere deep in the heart of the city the old statues lit up for the first time in centuries, because this had never happened before, not in 1,000 years. 3 royal hearts, 1 human soul, 1 unbreakable bond. Later the king stood on the palace steps speaking to the people. "Let this day be remembered," he said, voice strong. "The day Velthara changed. The day a human reminded us who we truly are." The people cheered, not for royalty, not for tradition, but for hope. Final scene. Darren sat under a tree, laughing as children climbed on his lap. Behind him, Vera trained young warriors. Zira played strategy games with students. Lunith taught poetry in the garden. They weren't just princesses anymore. They were partners. And Darren, he was home. He came as an outsider. He stayed as a hero. He remained as a man loved by 3 hearts, in a kingdom that finally knew what love really meant.